Welcome back, everybody, to the interviews with vets and MDs and scientists around the world about how to help your pets have the best quality of life for as long as possible. And today, I'm honored to be here with the founder of Holistic Vet in the UK, a veterinarian focusing on raw feeding, Dr. Nick Thompson. So thank you, Nick, for being here.
Jeff, it's lovely to see you. How are you doing?
Doing well, thank you. Thank you so much for asking. And why don't we jump right in? And that is, tell me a bit about what your conception is of, vitality. Vitality and balance are what we're going to focus on today, but tell me about vitality and how it's connected to energy or not, or what do you think?
It's a great question, and I think we can approach it on so many different levels. I was taught physics at school, and I've been following physics very closely. And the way I figure it is that it seems to me that the more that the physicists drill down into quarks and then Higgs bosons, the more esoteric and dark energy, if you like, the more there seems to be a coming together with the classic philosophers like Hahnemann and the great teachers, Buddha and Christ, and who all, I think, understood that there was a fundamental energy behind life. And I really think that science is doing some wonderful stuff, but they're all coming together. And also, if you look at poetry and biology, they are also becoming, if you reduce things enough, what's left? Energy. So I'm really happy being a homeopath, being a home philosopher and a home physicist. And I'm really comfortable that all those things seem to be rolling together more and more comfortably as the decades go along.
Okay, awesome. So philosophically, I think you give us a great idea of what your thoughts are about vitality, but how about science-wise? Like what we can measure in the body, or is it really more of a a subjective thing that we see as far as quality of life is, the vitality, or is there a direct physics connection with, let's say, the laws of physics, conservation of energy, or otherwise?
I think you're asking a similar question, but directing it more towards the energy of the body. Okay, so for that, I think that I'm going to answer it in a similar way, in that physics. If you asked a physicist 100 years ago what makes the body go, they'd probably say glucose. If you asked them 50 years ago, they'd say ATP. If you ask them 10 years ago, they'd be talking about mitochondrial metabolism and getting some talking about electron transfer and such like. So again, the more the more reductive those guys get, the biologists, the physicists get, I think the more they are getting to the essence of, well, it's just energy at the end, and whether you call it chi or vitality or the vital force was Hahnemann's phrase. I think we're all talking about something similar. Whether we are or not, is that important? I'm not sure whether it's important that we are talking the same thing, because at the end of the day, what makes you get out of bed and go to work and or do your gardening or go for a run? There is something there, and as long as we're all investigating and we're all comfortable with those investigations, and I'm happy with that, really.
So
I'm not
you
sure
might,
if that answers the question, Jeff. Does
it,
that
it,
answer
it
your
certainly
question?
does. And you mentioned gardening. So when we go in that direction, as far as, tell me a bit about if you conceive or you've thought about, the analogy of the difference between the gardening and building up um, farming or building up the soil so you have healthy and disease-resistant plants, and
Mm.
whether that relates to the person or pet or individual of any sort.
I think, yeah, it's a lovely analogy. And I think that perhaps the COVID situation that's been that we've all been through and may well go through again, but we've all been through. I think that has thrown into light the that we are actually responsible for our own health, not our doctor, not our spouse, not our family, not our bottle of pills in the medicine cabinet. It's us. And therefore, the question I think is, how do we best maintain our optimal fundamental health? And the way, for me, very brief, I could talk to you about this for a week, but the way we can look at this very briefly would be one has to maintain it at a spiritual level, at a physical level, uh, and at a physical level. So spiritual, meditation, I think, is essential. And there are other practices. Prayer is another form of meditation, and I think this is massively important. And only modern medicine, only in the last 20 years or so, have we really begun to realize quite how fundamentally life-changing these things are. A good meditative practice. What do they call it?
Right.
There's a name for it that the MDs use so that they can justify their fees. But so from a physical point of view, though, I think no. Somebody once said to me, "Be careful," or no, you need to watch what you think, what you drink, what you eat, and what you do. What you think, what you drink, what you eat, and what you do, in that order. If you're not thinking in the right direction, everything else is not going to happen. Be careful of what you drink. Don't drink too much rubbish. Not too much coffee, not too much alcohol, not too much, and very excellent quality, energetic and pure water is actually the thing to drink. You know, um, what you eat, that's what I'm all about. Let me show you my T-shirt. Raw. I'm doing
Raw.
because raw, because Hahnemann, as you well know, was very keen on the concept of removing obstacles to cure. And after 28 years in medicine, I'm really resonating with that, and I'm seeing a lot of animals who are getting a lot of great treatment, conventional, homeopathic, acupuncture, and what have you, but they're eating terrible food, and therefore, for me, that's an obstacle to real fundamental health. And for me, if the dog or the cat eats what they've evolved to eat, then that is logically something that's going to allow them to express themselves genetically, behaviorally, uh, individually, constitutionally, as as purely as possible. I feel. I'm sure we could discuss this all day, but that's really fundamental to me, which is why I'm doing so much work on raw and fresh food feeding, because it's such a fundamental thing. And I think if you don't get the fundamentals right, then it's very difficult to do the fancy stuff like good quality homeopathics.
All right. So food. You mentioned energized water. Is there any particular kind or method or
Wow. I think the best water is if you have a well in your garden where it's been filtered through rock for thousands of years, and then you just draw it every day. I think that's probably the ultimate. Most of us don't have that luxury. Therefore, I would be pretty wary of the stuff that comes out of the tap, especially in the States, because I think you have quite a lot of fluoridation, and I have absolutely no doubt that it's pretty dead material. Uh, I've no doubt it's been irradiated and sanitized with chlorine, even if they remove the chlorine somewhere else down the line. There's a lot of badness that has happened to that. And if you look at it from an energetic perspective, that water is probably passed through 4 or 5 sets of kidneys. You know, they say the water in London, whenever you have a glass of water in London, it's passed through 4 pairs of kidneys. I, I think,
I'm afraid to ask, meaning what?
meaning they recycle the water, you know? So, uh, if they were healthy people, then I'm sure that would be there may be a benefit, homeopathically. But I'm sure that the processing uh, probably kills any benefit that you may, or any energetic imprint that may have come along because of being passed through somebody who's particularly healthy. Therefore, I think sticking as much as possible to glass water bottles filled with fresh mountain water is probably about as good as it gets, because any type of processing of water, I think, is going to degrade it. Even, you get these osmotic double osmosis systems and what have you. It cleans it, but does it strip it? Does it devitalize it? That's what I worry about. Whereas if the water's gone through a mountain, I think there's a succussive effect going on as it drips. Tick, 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 tick. There's a lot of good energy buildup through that kind of process, and I think that would probably be the most vital water that one could drink.
So there's our vital water, but you talked about processed water versus fresh water. What about with food? Processed foods, high quality dry food or canned food. How would that compare, vitality wise or energy wise to a fresh food? Not even a raw
Uh,
food.
yeah, yeah. Uh, I think it's a very poor substitute. Actually, you knew I was going to say that, but there's a study. A study came out of a French group in 2018 where they looked at the diets of thousands of people, 6,000 or so people, and they said that for every 10% increase in processed food that these people within the study, 6,000 people had, yes, as you had some people who had no processed food, and you have some people who had 40-50%, which is very high in a human diet. But we feed our dogs and cats 100% kibble, 100%. So if there's a 12% increase in all cancers for every 10% increase in the human diet, and we feed our dogs and cats 100% processed food, you don't need to be a mathematician to work out that is a very, very dire situation, which is why in the States and in the UK, we have 50% of dogs over the age of 10 years old will get cancer. And I think there's no surprise there. There is no surprise.
Um,
Um, so processed food, I think we try not to feed it to our kids. We try and feed natural foods, and we try and avoid processed foods. In the UK we do, and I'm sure many people in the US do the same. And yet when we go to the vets, when the veterinary surgeon, the veterinarian, as you guys say, when you go to the veterinarian, they will hand you a bag of food and say, here, take this has all the nutrients your animal needs and they may be technically correct that all the micronutrients that are officially supposed to be within a food are in that food, but it's over processed. If you took your children to the doctor and said, I've got this kiddie chow, this big bag, that's all they need, you would be arrested there and then. And yet we are allowed to feed it to our cats and dogs. I think that's criminal. I think in 50 years' time, just as, or 100 years' time, just as we look at the Victorians and say, oh, they did some crazy things. I think people are going to look back on us and say they actually fed processed food and expected health. Just as in the 50s, you'd go to your doctor and they would offer you a cigarette. Yeah, we look back on that. That's only 70 years ago. I think it's going to be the same. In 70 years from now, we're going to look back and say veterinarians were actually giving this stuff out and expecting health. They actually, 95% of veterinarians did this. They gave this junk out and expected health. But there were a small band of renegades who said, no, feed fresh food, feed raw food. And I think that's going to be, in some form, that's going to be the food of the future. For me, that's the energetic impulse is from food. Well, one receives energy from so many sources, but food is very, very important.
Hey, fantastic. I've got a bunch of other questions, but I know our time is short for today, but I want to just make it clear to people, we're both veterinarians. We're talking about both animals and people. Nick, could you just take a minute and talk about One Health?
One Health.
One Health.
Tell me what you mean by One Health, because
the One Health initiative, onehealth.org.
I know nothing about it, Jeff. Tell me what it is, and I'll give you an opinion. I've seen it bandied about, but I've never really engaged with it. So give me a little background, and I'll tell you what I think.
It's just that we're all connected. It's that we're all about the balance, internal balance. The living beings are alive because of their energetic balance, as you've been talking about, and that dogs, cats, people, horses are really very much the same. All animals are the same, and that the planet, it's basically a connection between pets, people, and the planet.
Gotcha. Very good. That's a nice, concise thing. Because over here, there's the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons has a One Health initiative whereby they're trying to say something. So I've kind of ignored that. However, pets, people, and planet as One Health. So what you're talking about is James Lovelock's Gaia theory. That's the planet. It's connected. We are connected to the planet. Planet's connected to us. I'm with you totally on that. It's a beautiful concept, and I think it runs. It is absolute. I'm with you 100% there.
And I will be happy to send you a copy of the One Health roadmap to 2030, which is again produced by the One Health Group. I would love a copy of the 2018 French study that you mentioned about vitality and energy and processed food and cancer. And one last question, because we talked a lot about the terrain and balance.
Yeah.
Bugs. We haven't talked about bugs.
I'm glad you said that, because that was, for me, that was going to be a linking. So you were saying about pets, people, and planet. Well, I think bugs, there's a lot going on between all of those. You've got sunlight is a common factor. You've got, and sunlight begets plants, plants beget herbivores, ecosystems, and what have you. So there's a lot going on there. But let's talk about bugs for a second, because this is something I'm very, 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 very excited about. And that links pets, people, and planet. For example, there's a wonderful book. It's a very readable book if anybody would like to read about the Psychobiome Revolution by John Cryan Anderson. He's an American, and Cryan, he's an Irishman. They are saying that your bugs influence massively your brain. And one of John Crine's quotes is, if your bugs control your brain, they control everything. So therefore, your bugs control everything in us, human beings. Bugs control everything with our animals. And also bugs are everywhere and are instrumental, are integral to every process. Even the degradation of mountains is dependent on bacteria, as you know. And we're just beginning to learn about these. And so this is perhaps another element of commonality between us. We used to think bugs were the bad guys, but actually we're learning that it's about context. It's all about context. The bad guys are usually good. It's just if you give them an opportunity to criminalize, they will. That's really what, and we didn't understand that, and that's why antibiotics have flourished, and we are now reaching the nemesis of antibiotics, which is the antimicrobial resistance issues within bacteria, which is Gaia biting us back and saying, you actually got it wrong with the antibiotics. Bacteria are your friends, respect them, or else, you know.
Yep,
So there you go.
yep, yep.
That's
And
maybe a good place to finish.
yep, and I'm glad you mentioned anti, because what all these interviews about are working with the body, working with our bugs. By bugs mean bacteria and viruses, and yes, the bugs that eat plants and all those things that are
Yeah.
bugs. But it's just so important not to work against the bugs or
Yes.
against things, and work with them.
Look
And
after your bugs, and they will look after you very much. So
like,
eat, keep your bugs happy. Forget about you. Keep your bugs happy, and you'll be a lot healthier. That's for sure.
wow, what an awesome way to end. Thinking about, we'll have to write a whole paper on what we can do for our pets to keep their bugs happy. Thank you for that great idea.
Great. It's
Thank you so
fantastic.
much. I really appreciate your time and energy and everything that went into this. And we will hopefully get to talk for the week or two that will take to have this full discussion. Or it might be a
That's what it would
lifetime.
take, Jeff. Yes, or maybe a lifetime. Yes, I hope so, Jeff. I hope so. Please continue the great work that you're doing. Your teaching is wonderful, and sharing your knowledge and that your love of life and homeopathy and pets is wonderful. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and bye to everyone. And Nick, if you would stick around for just a minute, I just wanted to say thank you again, and we will talk to everyone soon.